On this journey to today's episode, we've been hopping around a bit on the timeline, haven't we? From December 2008 to March 2008 to January 2002. But today, no more hopping. Instead, we will make a long jump on the timeline. In our countdown today, we're actually going to an event without which all the moments and events that we have talked about till now and those that we are going to talk about in the future episodes would never have been possible. We are going to the big bang of Indian cricket, the genesis when a group of men stood shoulder to shoulder with the inventors of the game, who also were their colonizers, by the way, and on their land gave a glimpse of the powerhouse that India was capable of becoming. Yes, today, on number 22 in our list of the moments that defined Indian cricket, we go back to 1932 to the first ever test that Team India played. And from there to an era where cricket was showing first signs of what it could be in a country like India. At the start of the 20th century, when the country was dealing with so many challenges, a group of kings and princes took a liking to cricket. Actually, cricket in Britain was always seen as the sport of the affluent, and that's why the Indian princes wanted to be seen to be playing it too. Although not too many of them had the skills for it. Some of them just wanted to bat. And it said they didn't even walk down to the pitch for that. Sometimes they were driven to the pitch by a chauffeur in their car. But while they didn't always have the skills, what they had in abundance was wealth. I'm telling you all this because this had a huge role to play in the development of cricket in India. In 1911, an all-India team went to England for a 2.5-month-long tour entirely financed by a 19-year-old prince, the Maharaja of Patiala. In 1926, the same Maharaja financed the tour of an MCC team to India, the equivalent of the English cricket team, mind you. And when they saw C.K. Naidu smash 153 in just 116 minutes and got similar treatment from D.B. Devdhar just a few days later, they realized that Indian cricket had come a long way in 15 years and that there was actually quite a lot of talent here. Remember those names, the Naidus and the Devdhars. The Kohlis and the Tendulkars are here because the Naidus and the Devdhars were there. And they thought, okay, we can come here again. This talent, mind you, wasn't only coming from the rich and the royals. The talent was brewing because of extremely competitive tournaments played in Mumbai, which over its 5 decades of existence had multiple names. The Triangular, the Bombay Quadrangular, the Pentangular. There was another interesting factor at play in India's elevation to the big table. And it had to do with the Indian hockey team's dominance in the 1928 Olympics, which incidentally happened in Britain. And suddenly, it changed perceptions about Indians and their seriousness for sport. The MCC was to tour India again in the winter of 1930. But Mahatma Gandhi's call for civil disobedience meant the tour had to be called off. Cricket survived alongside politics even then too. But by 1932, things on that front had calmed down a bit and India were ready for their first tour of England. This time as a member nation of what was called the Imperial Cricket Conference. The team played 37 matches on the tour, including 26 first-class fixtures, out of which one was the first ever test at Lord's. Now, although the Maharaja of Porbandar was captain of the tour and the Maharaj Kumar of Limbdi the vice-captain, when it came to the first test, both very graciously stood down. They allowed the infinitely more talented, more capable C.K. Naidu to take up the leadership duties. And so it was Naidu who led the first Indian cricket team out at Lord's. I'll be honest, I've often dreamt about what it must have been that morning at Lord's. Did the Indian team walk out all chest out, confident? Or did they take small hesitant steps, unsure of whether they belonged? Irrespective, they put India on the Test cricket map, and what a start it was. In just about 30 minutes, India's legendary pacers Mohammad Nisar and Amar Singh had reduced England to 19 for 3, 2 of which were the scalps of two men, Herbert Sutcliffe and Percy Holmes, who just a week earlier had put on 555 runs together. Now, England recovered to make 259, but India's bowlers, particularly the pacey Nisar, had shown that they packed a punch as well. Although the batters didn't quite back up their efforts, they still could take a lot of pride in not having folded up. They batted 93 overs, just 12 less than the English team. But once England's second innings began, one could see that experience and not just talent was going to be a big part of this game. Yet, in their first ever test, India had given evidence of why they deserved more opportunities at this level. And this evidence was not only on offer in this one test, but in the entire 6 months that the team spent in England. In fact, the visitors won 9 first-class fixtures, which is not a mean feat at all for a team composed of players who had never played in those conditions before. The great C.K. Naidu, whose 153 against the MCC in 1926 had such a big role to play in India's elevation, didn't disappoint at all. 6 years later, he scored more than 1,500 runs on that tour. And that's how the wheels were set in motion for more cricket for Team India. And next winter, when the MCC team came to India, a young 22-year-old announced himself with a century on Test debut at the Bombay Gymkhana. That was a young Lala Amarnath, a man who would go on to forge a very long relationship with Indian cricket. Just like Naidu, Amarnath soon became a cricketing hero for a country that was beginning to like this colonial game a little bit more, even as the battle against the colonizers grew more intense. But heroes come with their own villains too, don't they? In a manner of speaking. Amarnath's story had one too, in the form of the Maharaj Kumar of Vizianagaram, or Vizi, a man as madly in love with cricket as he was with power, and that's why his introduction as a cricket administrator is more apt than that of a cricketer. But keeping all that scheming aside, the truth is, Vizi had resources, and he poured them in the development of the game in India. Meanwhile, remember, the cricket tours were still a small part of the Indian cricket calendar at this point. The local tournaments, particularly the highly volatile and watched intercommunal one in Mumbai, attracted a huge deal of attention. But in 1934, the calendar got a new entrant in the form of the Ranji Trophy, a tournament that has remained the centerpiece of domestic cricket in the country for close to a century now. It took some time to find its feet, especially in the presence of the vastly popular Pentangulars in Bombay. But by 1946, Mahatma Gandhi had expressed displeasure at the communal nature of the tournament, and it was done away with. So when India stepped onto the field that day at Lord's in 1932, it was the culmination of a very long journey as well as the start of an even longer one. In the context of those times, it probably wasn't the biggest news in the country, and rightly so. Today, when cricket has grown so massively popular and has become so intimately linked to the everyday life of an Indian, you cannot help but wonder about the significance of the 25th of June 1932. Because in a journey like this, every little contribution counts, and every generation inspires a newer generation. And that's why maybe the numbers of cricketers of that era don't look that impressive, but their contribution in the story of Indian cricket is way bigger. And as always, a little question at the end. When India played England in the Test matches in 1946, the team included a man who had earlier turned out for England thrice. Who are we talking about? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this story of great history and romance. If you did, and you like what you see on this YouTube channel, do like and subscribe.